the Chiefs are back.
Yeah.
Schwarber's here.
Became a canine here.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to call this Tuesday, February 19th, 2019 meeting of Middletown City Council to order. If you please stand and join me in a moment of meditation and the pledge allegiance to the flag. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vittori.
Here.
Mr. Bohannon.
Here.
Mr. Moon. Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Mulligan.
Here. I'll entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Moon. I know he had a family medical thing come up.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vittori.
Yes.
All right, our first item this evening is city manager reports. Mr. Atkins?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm glad to see everybody here talking about CRAs tonight. It's going to be an exciting meeting. Alexis, I'll let you come on up. There were questions on the first 8 or 9 items, which are CRA agreements for Mr. Fisher. There were some questions earlier. We had asked that he come forward, so I'll let Alexis introduce him, and he's here to answer any questions you have before voting later in the agenda.
Thank you.
Just to give you an additional overview of the projects to refresh your memory, the properties that Mr. Fisher has brought forward for CRA tax abatement are all along the Central Avenue corridor and in our historic downtown. As you know, these are very visible properties in the area, and we are trying very ardently to revitalize the downtown. And so we feel, staff feels that these projects are warranting tax abatements to help incent the opportunities in downtown, specifically Mr. Fisher's properties. I know that you had specific questions regarding his investments and other things, so at this time I'll invite Mr. Fisher to come up and answer them.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Would you like to open up with any thoughts on the plans for the properties?
I don't know what questions you have. I'd be happy to answer anything.
Okay. Well, I'll open up to council for, I know there were a number of questions on some of the emails. Any thoughts from council on the projects?
I guess my first question would be, and it was part and parcel with how the CRAs work, in so much as, is the intention to just put $25,000 into these properties, or do you feel over time they may need additional, just knowing the state of the properties and having done a lot of work on properties myself and figuring out what 25 can get done, do you think going forward there's more work to be done? And I don't know how that works with the CRA.
Yeah, like the building at 1318 where the Beauty Nook is, put a roof on there. I think that was $25,000 in itself. I've done at least 2 furnaces there. My big thing is like a roof, termite damage, structural things, you know, to make all the buildings, you know, have a basic integrity, and then just going from there. But yeah, 25, that's a drop in the bucket, easy.
Right.
Yeah, I've spent over $100,000 just on roofs on downtown buildings.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, and you know, part of this is maybe my lack of understanding of the CRA. It might also be just the somewhat newness of the CRA for this downtown corridor. But to work on 10 properties at the same time, putting $25,000 in each, rather than perhaps putting more into individual properties so that the end result is a higher quality rental property, because my understanding for the downtown plan is we're really trying to take those apartments to a higher rental rate,
Right.
more of a typical market rate.
It's incremental, because I've gone in, like, I've had apartments that when I got the places, they were renting for $200 a month. I mean, where do you get a 1-bedroom apartment for that? And I'm paying the water and the heat.
Right.
You know? So I'm going in, I'm doing cosmetic things, flooring, appliances, that type of thing, besides the roof and all that. Sometimes investing in a whole HVAC system. So to go in and just try to clear out the building, clear out the people that may have been there a few years, instead of just starting with one apartment, I might be getting like $350 a month or $450 a month. You know, so it's kind of just been incremental. It hasn't been like just go in and totally do a whole new building.
Gotcha.
And I've been kind of moving around a bit too. You know, I'll work on one building, then a different one, depending on what needs done. You know, a lot of these HVAC systems are from the '80s. You know, where the old owners were just replacing compressors and stuff. I try to go in and just start from scratch. You know.
And do most of these have tenants currently?
Oh yes, not as many as the commercial. I just rented 1391. It's going to be retail. Holistic Arts, that one, the 1318, that just rented not too long ago. King James, Jay's is doing like a resale shop. So most of the apartments are rented though, and the commercials, it's getting there.
And so is part of this also so then you can keep the tenants, because this is the kind of work you can do without having to displace people, as opposed to having to seriously renovate, then you'd have to probably.
I don't like to kick people out.
Right.
You know? Yeah. But some of those tenants, though, I have raised rents on. I'm not a big rent raiser, though. I mean, in Florida, I had people 6 or 7 years. I never raised their rent. That's not really my thing. But I have been able to, because they see the work I'm doing on the buildings. You know, even keeping the same tenants, they're willing to pay more.
Right. I guess the question is, and this is something that Mr. Bohannon and I talked about that you can weigh in on as well. Again, the intent of the CRA, if it is to, you know, do something specific for this downtown corridor, and when that's why we're giving these abatements as to oppose across the city. Whereas across the city, there are landlords who might make these kind of smaller improvements and not be getting CRA money, because the intention across the city isn't to create this kind of district that we're creating downtown. So is that somewhat of a unfair advantage? I mean, I know
And that's what we were talking about, and I've talked to other landlords as well, and it is sort of, I mean, it's a minuscule amount of money that we're talking about, but it is sort of an unfair advantage for the rest of the landlords that have been in this town forever and doing their thing. And I was thinking that we were trying to change the whole downtown dynamic, and with the Steve Kuhn building and the rents that we're talking about in that facility and so forth, these market rates that you're talking about are not really boosting up what we're trying to achieve in the downtown area. We can go for $500 a month apartment or houses all around the outskirts of the city, if you will. But as far as right downtown, the downtown hub, I mean, we were trying to, if we're going to have them as apartments, we'd like to see them $900, $1,000, $1,100 rents comparable to what we're doing over there. So I would expect an investor such as yourself, myself, and a lot of other ones that are here now, to invest more and bring the values up, not just make them comparable to what's going on around the rest of the city.
Well, Mr. Bohannon, I agree with you there, but you have to rent those apartments. And for you, what downtown looks like now, what it looked like when I started buying 3 years ago, you can't just go in and say, this is a $900 apartment. Look at all the money I put into it. Yes, you can make it look great, something like you see on HGTV, but you got to find the renter. And they're still looking at downtown and thinking, I don't want to, excuse me, live there. When I was in Florida, I lived in an area called Village of the Arts. It was a crackhead neighborhood. The city went in, made a mixed-use zoning. I was a treasurer on the board for 2 years and really improved it. And through the downturn in the economy, we still had like 35 galleries that would be open, restaurants. So it kind of held its own. But you still had people thinking it was the ghetto. They said, well, is it safe to go down there? You know, I'd hear that throughout the city. You know, so you got to, it's not an overnight thing, I don't think. It'd be great if it was, but to make those improvements, it's an attraction thing. It's not like just open it and they will come. It keeps improving, and that attracts what you want.
Well, I've talked to older people in the city, in my other business that I have, And they would love to be able to move downtown. They're close to everything and so forth, but they don't want to move into a $500 a month apartment. They want to move into something that they can really be proud of, and, they're looking at $1,000 or whatever in their payments. So, I personally, I think it's an unfair advantage to the rest of the landlords out there who are doing it, the way that normally you do it. I understand, because it is a city, the inner city, and we're trying to redevelop it and everything. We've got to give incentives to do that. I would just like to see, if we were going to do that, that the investment was going to be more substantial and start the ball rolling. You say, we can't do it, I can't rent them because, the city just isn't able to carry that kind of rent right now. Somebody's got to start. And, whether it be yourself or another investor or something like that, that's what I would really like to see if we're going to really develop downtown Middletown and have apartments where people, young people and so forth, that are wanting to live downtown, they're not going to want to live in a $500 a month apartment. They're going to want to live in something more substantial. So that's just my point of view.
Mr. Fisher, one question. Did the $25,000 number, and now we've learned tonight that may not quantify all the investment. Have you quantified the value of your time if you're as lead contractor for these rehabs? Is that number in there in your application?
Not. No, and the IRS doesn't allow that either.
Okay.
I can work my butt off on a property, they don't care.
So you're doing a lot of the work yourself?
What I can within the permitting process, yes.
Okay. Well, I understand council's concerns on it, but ultimately, I think what Mr. Fisher did is he applied under the guidelines that are currently in place, and if we're in a situation now where we're kind of moving the goalposts on them, I think that may make it difficult for us in the long run in attracting new development. So, again, I applaud you for what you're trying to do, and we'll do what we can to help you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr. Fish, could you detail the total amount? You mentioned $100,000 you spent on roofs so far in your downtown building. What's the total amount you've invested in these buildings to date so far?
To buy them or just in?
The improvements, just the improvements.
Okay, 1720 Central, which is up the road. That was I did a roof there. That's about all I've done on that one. That was about $25,000. 1364 to 68. Put a new roof on there. That was $20,000. 1318 to 1326. That was a new roof. That was, I think, maybe around $25,000, I forget. Put a flat roof on 1500 First Avenue. That was about $7,000. Put a roof on I put a roof on the garages and garage doors on the buildings behind 1318. That was probably about another $10,000. HVAC systems, I've spent at least $20,000 to $30,000. Windows, the house there at 12 Clark, I redid that, painting, exterior roof on that. Oh, and the roof at 1391, that was a little over $20,000. That was done recently. That property had sat for over 4 years. Mr. Cicito did nothing to it. So, I mean, I'm getting stuff done. It's just, I don't have the funds to do exactly what I want all the time. Put a new glass and aluminum storefront on 1372 with discount glass. That was about $10,000. So, yeah. I don't know what that adds up to, but it's a lot.
90, 110, yeah, probably close to 130, 140,000 maybe. But that doesn't represent all you're looking to invest in those buildings. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Oh, no, that's the start. My goal is to get them looking good and rentable and get tenants in there. That is my goal, and, and keep improving the buildings as they are so I can get, better rents and attract better tenants too.
And you view these as a long-term holding, or do you see you selling these off?
I'm not
or?
a flipper.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in Florida, you
Well, in fact,
invested properties?
Yeah, I bought a lot of stuff in Florida, like when the market really crashed there, the bubble really burst in Florida, and I was able to buy a lot of stuff then. And really, it's just the last 2 or 3 years I've been selling some of that there to invest up here. I've kind of relocated back. I grew up in Dayton, but, I've been down there for years, but now I'm back.
Yeah. And just for clarification, most of these are, I mean, I remember reading through these, but most are mixed use with commercial and retail on the first floor and residential up above. And
Absolutely, yeah.
I understand Mr. Bohannon's concern over providing undue subsidies to investors and landlords, but with the mixed use nature of these, I think it is a little different, you know, because the commercial side has the opportunity to bring, you know, jobs and employment as well too, which is, I think, a key part of the revitalization for downtown, is having the employee base down there as well as, you know, some merchants and activities to bring others down. And
Exactly.
sometimes the residential side can help support the commercial side. It is a challenging dynamic to bring some of these back. So certainly appreciate what you've done on that. But my main question, I guess, was just as long as you're not done, because I think the concern was the 25,000 was listed in the application seemed to be a pretty low number.
It is.
And may not fully reflect what the final intent is going to be and final investments are going to be. So, okay. Anything else from council for Mr. Fisher while he's here?
I think just to clarify, so if down the road he wants to put 50 into another, so that goes on to the same CRA, or do we have to do another CRA?
Same.
So it just keeps getting added on year after year as he does more improvements? Okay. And was there an intent set out to the CRA? Like, are there parameters? Like, the intent of the CRA is
The
to?
intent of the CRA is to remove barriers to investment in a certain particular area. The CRA is established to help historic areas be revitalized. And so a CRA has to be surrounded or anchored by a historic landmark or historic property of some kind. We have several of those in downtown within the CRA that allows us to have that tool available to us. Many times in historic areas, the barriers to investment, as you know, are older buildings, aging infrastructure in those buildings, and so these tax abatements allow property owners and investors to invest in their properties without the undue liability of increased taxes over the long term. It just helps equal out and incent investment in the area. And, you know, for other landlords or investors out there, there are plenty of properties in downtown that are still available to be invested in, and that they could certainly come and do that if that's something that they would like to do. There's nothing preventing other landlords from buying properties in downtown and taking advantage of the street.
And did revitalization have any definition, or it's just like any parameter? Did revitalization have any parameters? Like, is there a definition to revitalization, or?
If there is, it would be contained in the revised code, and I don't know that by heart.
Do you know what that, I just don't know, again, like, speaking to intent, if we know what revitalization means.
It's more investment in the property to raise the value, more than a specific word revitalization, or it's investing into the property so the property goes up. And the idea is you get the benefit of, because he's still gonna have to pay property taxes on
Sure.
the value as it is now.
Right, it's the incremental, so it's about $250 a year.
Right,
per
and
property,
so
right?
the piece of this is, if he doesn't invest, there's no incentive. If he invests and the value doesn't go up, there's no incentive. If he invests and the property does go up in value, I hope that we're happy about that. And so, again, I share Councilman Mulligan's concern that we have a valid application who meets the criteria of the program as it's been presented for, gosh, 8, 9 years now, that I would like to see these go forward. If you want to stop and reevaluate that program later, you want some threshold of investment before you're willing to extend that type of thing, I'm happy to look at that in the future, but I'm concerned about moving the goalposts as well. That, you know, we've sent staff out to do this, and we have a valid application in front of us that I would like to see approved. Again, if we want to change the world after that, that's fine, but I would like to give him the benefit of what he thought he was signing up for.
Well, what I was gonna say is I have a definition of revitalization. Where do you wanna eat dinner tonight? You know, when people could say, well, let's go downtown, that's a good sign to
Me
me.
too.
Yeah.
And also, he's not without risk in making these applications. Each property contains a $750 application fee payable to the state of Ohio. So he may or may not reap the benefits of that if his property values don't go up high enough to abate that much of his taxes. So, you know, just like the city, he is having to make some payment to make this application.
Anything else from council for Mr. Fisher? Okay, thank you for coming down, appreciate
Thank
the
you very much. I
opportunity.
do have to show an apartment, so I have to
Okay,
go, but
well,
thank you.
thank you for making time for us, appreciate that. So, all right. Mr. Atkins, anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, one more. Steve Arrowsmith is here from the Warren County Drug Task Force to give a year of review 2018 report. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you again this year for allowing me to come back and take a few minutes. I'll be brief. Looks like we have a full agenda tonight, so you don't need me up here for long, but here mainly to say thank you once again. Thank you to council for your support again, to the Warren County Drug Task Force throughout 2018, and also to the chief and the men and women of the Middletown Police Department. We could not do what we do all year without those folks. So, in fact, we were just in your city 2 hours ago working with your drug unit on a case. So we do a lot of that back and forth, as you know. So I quickly wanted to touch on just a couple things about our drug task force. Probably repeat for a lot of you. So, like I said, I'll be brief, but just our basic structure for 2018 remained the same. We're a multi-jurisdictional drug task force operating out of Warren County. We remain an initiative of the Ohio HIDA program, which is the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area program. We've been a part of that since 2004. As the Drug Task Force Commander, I report to a policy board. That still happens every month. The policy board is made up of the department heads or the chiefs and the sheriff and the prosecutor of 15 different agencies. So those are my bosses. Every month I go to them and brief them on active task force investigations. Personnel for 2018, we maintained a staff of 23 personnel. That's uniform interdiction people, detectives, and our support staff. Those 23 individuals come from 12 different law enforcement agencies. Includes one member of the FBI, one member of DEA, multiple members from the Highway Patrol, BCI agent, and a representative of the Ohio National Guard as well. Our funding for our drug task force continues to be a challenge for me. We rely heavily on grant dollars, the JAG grant, which is a federal grant, the Drug Law Enforcement Grant, which is a state grant. The HIDA program provides some funding to us. We also rely on a contribution from the Warren County Commissioners, as well as contributions from our communities within Warren County that make a financial donation to us and continue to be our partners. Some of the drug trends that we saw throughout 2018 will be no shock probably to you either. Methamphetamine started to spike at the end of 2017, really took off in 2018. So we saw about a 142% increase in our methamphetamine seizures throughout 2018 in comparison to 2017. At the same time, we saw about an 88% decrease in our fentanyl seizures in Warren County. Multi-jurisdictional drug task forces that are funded through grants are required to report weekly to Columbus our seizure stats. So in looking at those seizure numbers for 2018, the methamphetamine seizures ranked Warren County as 6th in the state. And Butler County, I think, was much higher than that. So a lot of activity down in southwest Ohio here. Prescription drugs also remained a problem for us in 2018. Significant seizures of prescription drugs, and we were unfortunately 3rd in the state for prescription drug seizures statewide out of 88 counties. Overdose deaths in Warren County, we did see a decrease in overdose deaths as well. We had about 102 actual overdose deaths in 2017. 2018, we were down to 52 overdose deaths. So couple points on our activity in 2018. Overall, 768 cases. That was combined, our detectives and our interdiction squad. About 300 felony arrests, 125 search warrants, and seized 85 guns. So that's all I got. Thank you again for allowing me to come back. Hopefully you'll take the time to flip through the annual report. I did highlight a few cases in there. And again, thank you, and thank you to your police department for their work with us throughout the year.
Thank you, Major Smith. Appreciate the update and your participation and cooperation with our group. So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Have a good night.
That's everything, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Next up, I have a couple comment cards, and then we'll get to Judge Sharon, if that's all right. I'd like to invite Mel Kutsera and Monica Nenny down. Good evening. If we get your names and addresses for the record, please.
I'm Mel Kutsera. My address is 7167 Browns Run Road. I operate a business at 1120 Central Avenue.
And I am Monica Nenny. My home address here in Middletown is 7 North Highview, but I also operate a business with Mel at 1120 Central Avenue.
Go ahead.
We are excited that on Friday, March 1st, we will be sponsoring Middletown's first annual Eco Fest. Headquarters will be at 1126 Central Avenue. There will be kids' activities and eco demos fit for all ages. There will also be a seed stops throughout downtown. A list of local partners that will be participating include Butler County Solid Waste, Butler County Soil and Water Conservation, Keep Middletown Beautiful, Cohen Recycling, and Butler Tech.
We hope to bring attention to all of the local groups working to make our community a better, cleaner, healthier place to live. While providing them a place to share their progress and success, we hope that those who attend are also inspired to join the cause, because change starts at the local level. This year, our primary focus is to educate and encourage a re-energized recycling effort right here in Middletown.
It's our understanding that recycling numbers in Middletown are much lower when compared to other cities of the same size. Municipalities across the nation have been actively working towards more sustainable waste management practices, and we think Middletown should not only embrace their successes, but take aggressive action to surpass them. We are asking council to join us in action.
As a business, we are making our pledge to begin recycling all of our aluminum cans and glass bottles. We're asking all of the businesses in downtown to do the same. And so we were hoping that we could count on council to make a pledge and join us in EcoFest 2019.
Okay, well, thanks for coming down tonight. Look forward to seeing you the first. Should be a good time. Hopefully have some good weather, good spring weather by then. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if there's anything that that you guys could suggest or provide as a resource for us on the first, we would be happy to have that.
Okay, Doug looking at, see what we can do. Thank you. All right. All right, now with that, I'd like to invite Judge Sharon down. Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'll try and be brief. I don't know if I'll be as brief as the last two presenters were, but I'll try. Middletown Municipal Court has for many years been a leader in the criminal justice community by using evidence-based programs to set policies that benefit our community. In the 1990s, the court completed a comprehensive study on the impact of jail and treatment for OVI offenders, for example. Then in the late 1990s and early 2000s, we addressed the domestic violence problem, and not only with offenders, but victims as well. And we were one of the first courts to provide a program for victims paid for by the offenders. Again, this policy also involved both jail and treatment. In the last few years, the heroin problem has again challenged the city and the court to develop an evidence-based program using drug court models, including administration of Vivitrol shots to defendants prior to their release from jail, from the city jail. And all of these best practices involved both jail and treatment. And as you all know, Middletown has made great strides combating the drug crisis over the past several years through the combined efforts of your council, your city manager, and the Heroin Summit, the first responders of the fire and police, the rapid response team, hospitals, the medical community, drug counselors, and other treatment providers, and through additional efforts of the courts. In 2018, Middletown Municipal Court alone processed over 6,000 criminal cases. About 70% of these cases involve drug or alcohol-related offenses, and the court has also tried to react and respond appropriately. Counseling agencies are now embedded into each court docket. Greatly enhances the treatment options, with many defendants going directly from jail to inpatient, outpatient, and intensive outpatient treatment programs. In 2018, the court performed over 400 drug screens. Many of those were in the courtroom on defendants while they were in their holding cell prior to their sentencing. Last year, their court referred 420 defendants to Access Counseling Agency alone. That's the biggest counseling agency in Middletown. It's the only nonprofit one that I'm aware of in Middletown. 55% of those 420 people remain in treatment. In 2018, 54 defendants were transported directly from jail to inpatient drug and alcohol rehab facilities. Most of those facilities will not accept a defendant, a patient, our defendant, their patient, until they've detoxed from whatever is in their system. If it's opioids, this can be up to 14 days. If it's methamphetamine, this can be anywhere from 30 to 45 days. In 2018, 53 Vivitrol injections were administered to defendants while they were in the jail as they were being released into treatment and into probation. Vivitrol also cannot be administered until a person is fully detoxed. It's my understanding that the city administration is proposing and that you are considering closing the jail sometime in the near future. I was informed last week that the issue has been tabled until next year, but I believe the issue remains critical and timely and still merits discussion right now. I fully respect the city manager, and he knows that, and the work he's done in Middletown. He certainly was the person that we needed for the job when he came onto the job. However, we simply have a pretty profound disagreement on this singular issue. I don't think he's pretty close to me, so he might hit me or something while I'm up here.
I think he knows better. But.
Not buying them.
The reduction in jail population has already created limitations in the court. Most glaringly with unserved warrants. There are over 1,800 unserved warrants in Middletown right now, and that's not including warrants for monetary sanctions. The warrants include failure to appear, original unserved warrants, and failure to comply warrants. Failure to appear warrants were up 15% from 2017 to 2018. It's about the same period of time that the jail population was being reduced. More importantly, felony failure to appear warrants are up 30%. Let me repeat that. Felony failure to appear warrants are up 30%. Non-compliance with probation orders are up as well. Our probation officers are well educated. They have to have a master's degree just to get the job to be a probation officer, and they're very well trained, and they're very capable of helping offenders change their behavior, but without enforcement of violations, they can't be effective at gaining positive changes and compliance by defendants. Unserved warrants and non-acceptance at the jail will continue to result in more criminal behavior. Middletown's Director of Court Services of the court, Steve Longworth, serves on Governor DeWine's new warrant task force. The governor wants a plan to combat the state's ever-growing warrant crisis. It's not just happening here in Middletown, it's everywhere. As justice is not served for the victims of these crimes when a warrant languishes unserved. Make no mistake, the jail will, in my opinion, have a profound, catastrophic impact on the city of Middletown and its residents. Criminals who should be in jail will not be in jail. Crime will increase. Drug-related activity and overdoses will increase. The city's expenses will increase. Public safety will further be jeopardized. Middletown will no longer have control over many of the offenders committing offenses in Middletown. Let me give you some examples. One morning last week, the court heard 13 methamphetamine cases. You heard the gentleman from Warren County. I think he said 142% increase of methamphetamine cases. It's hit here just like that, if not worse. And when I say 13 meth cases, that can be defendants that were charged with a felony count of possession of methamphetamine, that the charge was reduced to a misdemeanor because if it's a small amount of methamphetamine, when it gets bound over to the grand jury, they send it back or they ignore it entirely. So many of these cases are being pled down on misdemeanors. So of those 13, some of them were plea downs from felony charges. Other ones were drug offenses where I ordered drug screen of them, and they tested positive for methamphetamine coming into court. So there was 13 of them, and many of them, and we're seeing this daily in court, many of them were violent and or actively psychotic in the courtroom, and jail was necessary to keep you and them safe. Most of them were sentenced to a jail term either downstairs or at one of the two counties' jails. As you know, Middletown straddles both Butler and Warren County, so if you commit an offense and you're convicted in somewhere like shoplifting at Kohl's or Kroger's or any of those stores out on the East End, you very well would likely be sentenced in Warren County. If they were sentenced to the county jail, they very well may likely have been released by now. We have no control over that. And potentially, if they were released that fast, they would still be under the influence of methamphetamine. Let's be honest, in most cases, no jail likely means no treatment. No treatment likely means recidivism. It's a cycle. It's going to continue. All the court can do is put them on probation if there's no jail. Not surprisingly, probation officers are completely undermined if the probationer knows that he or she will not go to jail if they reoffend or they violate their probation. The city has already reduced the maximum jail population from an average of 60 to 70 or higher prisoners down to about 40. As a result, and as I already alluded to, the failure to appears at arraignment have increased dramatically. Often, I would even say more often than not, 13 to 15 daily, where we're just sitting there calling a name, and I'll call it again, and they won't be there, and I'll issue another bench warrant for their arrest. It gets frustrating. There are extreme examples of the associated risks with these failure to appears. A couple weeks ago, it might have been 3 weeks ago, there was a defendant that was charged with misdemeanor assault, carrying a concealed weapon. It was a knife, and resisting arrest. He was released on his own recognizance and given a citation, a summons to come to court the following week. So he was booked and released. And not only did he fail to appear, a couple days later, he allegedly robbed a gas station, again with a weapon, another knife. And now he's charged with aggravated robbery and carrying a concealed weapon for robbing that gas station. So failure to appears, it's not just a nuisance, it's a hardship and it's a hazard. Many offenders are summoned and then fail to appear. They're rearrested, re-released from jail, re-summoned, and they fail to appear again, sometimes 4 or 5 times. That happens upwards of 10 times a week, where they don't just fail to appear once or twice, 4 or 5 times in a row, where they're being re-summoned to come back to court. Make no mistake, these numbers will only increase exponentially if the jail closes entirely. We had one young man, he had a first-degree misdemeanor count of driving under suspension. He failed to appear for his hearing. He was in a wreck a couple days later in Warren County. He was driving a rental car, drove it into an old man's car, and broke the old man's neck. So that's the kind of stuff we're seeing. The thing that I've discovered just in my short 14 months on the bench is that if you can imagine it, it either has, is, or will happen. Every scenario that you can possibly think of, they happen. It's frightening. As I indicated already, Middletown Municipal Court covers 2 counties. Neither county will house nonviolent misdemeanor offenders. Let me repeat that. Neither Butler County nor Warren County will house nonviolent misdemeanor offenders. That's their policies. They won't do it. I was just speaking to the gentleman from Warren County. He indicated that if you're a female in Warren County and you have a felony offense, it might be a felony too. You still might not, they might put you on an ankle bracelet, maybe not. That's how overcrowded they are, particularly with female prisoners. Catch and release will become the routine. So someone charged with breaking into your garage and stealing your lawnmower and getting arrested, they could be back tomorrow stealing your snowblower, getting arrested, come back the next day stealing something. They're not going to go to jail. They can't. If there's no jail, we have no control over that issue if the jail closes. We're at the mercy of one of those 2 county jails. The current statewide trend for pretrial confinement is to use evidence-based risk assessment tools to determine bond, not a blanket release or hold based on the charge alone. The risk assessment on felony cases in our court has recently started to involve a partnership between the Butler County Pretrial Services and the court. This allows low-risk felony offenders to be released while their case is pending. It may include electronic home monitoring, treatment, and/or reporting to a probation officer for pretrial release. This reduces jail population as these low-risk felony offenders would otherwise be held in jail up to 10 days while they're waiting for their preliminary hearing, and for extended periods after that if their case is bound over while they're waiting for their case to either go to trial or finish disposition. On misdemeanor offenses, the court is evaluating the risk posed by the offender and releasing and setting conditions of release such as bond accordingly. This is a judicial termination, not an administrative one. The ripple effects of closing the jail will run broad and deep, and they include economic, social, and safety considerations beyond what I've mentioned already. The effects may be permanent because once that jail closes, it's closed for good. Economically, the jail study of 2017, which you paid $30,000 for, recommends keeping the jail open. It considers many but not all of the economic factors involved. Some that it doesn't include, for example, currently most defendants appear in court for their arraignment on the morning following their arrest. Many of them, if not most of them, are eligible for a public defender who they speak with that same morning, and then they reappear before the court that same morning, and they are as likely as not to have their case completely finished and disposed of that same morning. They're done. Whether it's go to jail or be released on probation or whatever terms, it's finished. It's a very efficient process that's been in place for a long time, long before I got here. However, with no jail, if the defendants are incarcerated in one of the two county jails, they'll have to either have a video arraignment, which the court is not currently equipped for or capable of, or they have to be transported to the court for their arraignment, women in one transport vehicle, men in another transport vehicle. Even with video arraignment, each defendant would still have to be transported to the court to speak with their attorney and for their case to be heard ultimately. If there's pre-trials and trials involved, that could involve several hearings and them being transported for each one of those hearings, all at the city's expense. Another example, let's say a detective needs to interview a person that's being held in jail. Right now, he walks the 100 or so feet from his desk or her desk to the jail cell that the defendant is in. They take him back to the interview room. They interview him. Let's say it takes an hour, and they walk him back. Let's say the whole process takes an hour, hour and a half. If that same prisoner is housed at the county, then they got to drive down to Hamilton or over to Lebanon. They got to wait the 30, 45, 60 minutes that it's going to take that prisoner to be brought out to the interview room. They got to interview him, then drive back to Middletown. They've lost half of their day in that process. These are some of the hidden considerations that you need to consider in this process. Additionally, police often have to wait with a prisoner for up to an hour or longer just to have one of the county jails process the prisoner into jail. There are just so many hidden costs associated with the jail closure that you really need to consider before you make any decision on this issue. I've heard the argument that there are only 2 other municipal jails now operating in Ohio, and what if the state closes our jail because our jail's out of compliance with state regulations? First, there are actually about 6 dozen municipally operated jails in Ohio. 5 of them, in 5 of them, a prisoner can be sentenced up to 18 months. A prisoner on a misdemeanor charge can serve up to 18 months. That would be 3 6-month charges that they've been sentenced on. So 5 of the jails in Ohio can actually house a prisoner up to that amount of time. In my tenure in the court, I don't know that that's happened at all. I don't know that there's any prisoner in Middletown jail that's served remotely that long of a term. In others, the time is limited to 12 days, 3 days, or some even are 12-hour holding cells. No jails in Ohio have closed in the past 10 years, and only one city jail, over that same 10-year period, has stopped operating as a full-service jail and is now a 12-day jail. Most of the municipally operated jails in Ohio, in fact, 2/3 of all jails in Ohio were out of compliance with state standards in 2016. Middletown is not alone in our jail being out of compliance with state regulations. In 2017, 7 of the 12 jails in the 8 counties comprising Southwest Ohio were found to be overcrowded. And that's only gotten worse since 2017. And all but one of those jails during that same time was, let me repeat that, all but one of those jails was found to be out of compliance with state safety and security standards. 12 jails, 11 out of compliance. The Ohio Board of Adult Detention supervises jail compliance, and Middletown's jail has been open since 1976, and it's been out of compliance since 1977. We don't have windows in our jail. It's out of compliance. We will never have windows in our jail. The Bureau of Adult Detention has never closed down a jail and has, at least to my knowledge, never threatened Middletown with closing its jail. The Bureau's last report on our jail indicates areas of noncompliance and rates their severity, as you all are all aware of. Many of those areas appear to be remediable. Others, like again the lack of direct sunlight, are not remediable. But fixing the things that can be fixed seems that it would cost much less than the cost of closing the jail and the resulting expenses in fixing those issues would also mitigate against any agency attempting to close our jail. There are many people here tonight solely because of their concern about this issue. All 4 living retired chiefs of police stand united here tonight in their opposition to the closing of our city jail. Council, all 5 of you could, I believe, greatly benefit from their input. I've heard it argued that their input is less relevant today because circumstances and times have changed. I agree, circumstances have changed in several regards. The jail population has been reduced nearly by half from when these men were chiefs, and thus should be more affordable and manageable. At the request of the police department, the court is now issuing many more medical furloughs for prisoners to be released from jail when requested, so as to avoid the cost of treatment for their medical issues being paid by the city. Prisoners with medical issues are also being sent for medical treatment prior to being jailed. So yes, circumstances regarding the jail have changed and they've improved in many ways. There are also many other stakeholders here tonight whose input the council would benefit from. I believe FOP is here, other first responders, business owners, landlords, professional treatment providers, and concerned citizens in Middletown. They're all stakeholders in this issue, and they all want and they deserve to be heard on this issue. The future of the jail should not be left up to any one person or perhaps even to city council. Maybe this is something that should be put to a vote by the voters of Middletown. Part of the problem is
we'd like to let the judge finish too. If you could hold your applause maybe to the very end, that'd be.
I think I'm about done.
Okay, well, good.
Part of the problem is I don't see any clear roadmap. I don't know what the process would be to close the jail. Is that something that you all would vote on? Is that something that Doug could decide administratively? That's a pretty profoundly important issue to me, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. What I would ask, at a minimum, if council is considering closing this resource, is to establish a task force or committee to investigate all options and all repercussions of closing the jail before taking any other action. And I think that should be a good cross-section of the community. You know, a lot of the people that I've mentioned tonight that have good wisdom and information and knowledge that you all could benefit from. The ultimate purpose of the jail is to protect the residents of your community and to punish and rehabilitate offenders. Closing the city's jail will have the opposite effect. Neither Butler County nor Warren County will rescue Middletown from that fate. They simply don't have the space or the available resources. Middletown will be fighting over some of the beds that the other communities are already fighting over right now. And once Middletown comes into that mix, that's that many fewer beds for everybody. And once that jail closes, it will never open again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Okay, next card I have is for Harvey Park. Is Harvey Park available? There we go. Well, let's get to the podium there first, Chief, before we... So we get your name and address for the record,
My name is
please?
Harvey Poff. I live at 6515 Canterbury Drive. And you need anything else?
No, good evening. Thanks for coming down.
Okay. I come down here not to throw rocks or make accusations. The closing of this jail was alerted to me about 4 years ago by Judge Mark Wall, and he was very emotional about it. I had the luxury of working as a Middletown police officer for over 16 years with wonderful people. And I also had the luxury of working in a very small department in Butler County, Monroe, for 14 years. And I found that there is a definite difference in terms of what you got. Sometimes you maybe don't appreciate it. And the ability of some of these officers out here risking their necks, putting a bad person in a police cruiser, and being able to bring him down into this jail, into that sally port, is a great relief. But sometimes other departments don't have that luxury. They have to put him in a cruiser and may drive 12 miles to Hamilton. And if it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night before 2 o'clock, you might be the fourth car getting into that vehicle sally port. It's like going through Alfie's. You got to wait your turn. Then they take the prisoner out. Then you got to go park your cruiser and come back in and get in line. I found that very disturbing, and sometimes arresting an individual might take 2 hours. I didn't like the fact that our cruisers and our personnel would have to drive 12 miles to Hamilton or 16 miles to Lebanon when we have a jail here. I read Steve Holland's report, one of many. It's not demanding that we shut down the jail. It is stating that we need to make a good faith effort to correct what we can to make it better. When that jail was built, we all knew, some of these people are sitting right here and know exactly what I'm talking about. There was no ventilation properly taken care of. We didn't have sunlight, nor did we have a playground, but we did the best that we could do. The first night I worked in that jail was the first night it was opened. There were 36 cells, 36 bunks. At 10 o'clock, we had filled the jail. Me being young, just a patrol officer, a little light went on and said, we got problems. We got major problems. Within 3 weeks, we double bunked those jail cells. That commander's sitting right here right now. He can vouch for that. So we made it 76. And it seemed to me that we were filled most of the time. I don't like the fact also by transporting prisoners that far. I don't care if they're in a cruiser, a paddy wagon, or a dog sled. Those officers are putting themselves at risk. I think, I didn't know this, Judge Sharon pointed it out, that it has been tabled. Thank God, for the benefit of this community. Thank you, that we at least got a year's reprieve. I agree with him, the task force needs to be put together. I think there needs to be some sit down, and I think the community supports it. If you remember, I had the luxury of the last safety levy of being the chairman. That passed by 75% in this community. That's 3 out of 4 voters. So I think the community is behind us, but I'm not dumb enough to know the jails are cheap. It's expensive. I realize that. Public safety is expensive. I know that also. But for God's sakes, one thing that we can't afford to lose is the ability to incarcerate the bad guys. It was mentioned in here about summons. The summons, I've seen it work in reverse. I've actually had a bad guy show me his summons. I said, well, you are going to show up for court. Hell no, I'm not. Why should I? Now, if that's the attitude, and this guy wasn't a real bad actor, if he's saying that, what are the others saying? All we're going to do is issue bench warrants and stack them up. Right now, I guess you said we have 1,800? That's 1,800 with a lot of money setting up there. And we don't have enough policemen to start a fight, much less break one up. We need warrant officers. We need to hire more policemen and get warrant officers out here serving these warrants.
Could I ask you to conclude, Mr. Poff? We're running long on time. I afforded the judge a little luxury, but I'd like to.
Well, he took all my time.
Yeah, he's entitled. The judge has that position, so thank you, Mr. Poff. Thank you. Next to try to have us from Mr. Bill Becker. Mr. Becker. There he is. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, too.
Bill Becker, 4738 Longford Drive here in Middletown. Still live here. Wow, I haven't seen this crowd since I sat on that side of the table, and I think it was Sun Coke or something like that. So you've got some people's interest here. You know, I can bring a different perspective to this this jail issue. I've worked in that jail. I was administrator of that jail. I was the chief of the department that ran that jail. I was the city manager. And I also sat in your seat as a city council. And this isn't a new issue, as most of you folks know. The jail has been an issue. Every time the budget gets tight, what about the jail? There's been countless studies done. Every one of those studies have showed closing the jail would be a huge mistake. You know, the Middletown jail, and you've heard a lot of this from the judge. I just repeat his speech and Harvey and go on, but we house the people that impact our community in the worst way. It's the porch thieves, it's the misdemeanors, it's the people that are walking out without paying in your restaurants, it's the people, the DWIs that are driving on our streets. Those are the people that we house in our jail. And that's the people that impact us. The felons go on to the bigger jails. Closing our jail would be the biggest mistake this council could make. Like I said, I've looked at these studies, I've been on these studies. I'll be glad to chair another committee if you want to do that, to give us a year to look at it. But the jail is so valuable to this community, closing it will impact everybody. I don't know how these officers today work. I had 93 sworn officers. We don't have that today. They're busy. And to think that these officers are now going to have to drive to Hamilton, if you can get them in, and the judge is right, they're not going to take the nonviolent. Neither is Warren County. They got their own problems. We got to face up to Middletown problems. We have to keep this jail open and find ways to improve it. Jail standards, they've been there since we've been there. We've never been in compliance, and we never will, but we got to continue to work to make it better, but we got to continue to keep that jail open. I would think that the biggest mistake this council would make in your term would be to close that jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. All right, that concludes the public comment cards I have this evening. We can move to our consent agenda. Ms. Skank.
For your consideration this evening, we have the approval of the city council minutes from December 18th, 2018 and January the 8th, 2019. To confirm the personnel appointments of Heather Helmuth and Melissa Langalis to the position of part-time victim advocate in the Department of Administrative Services Law Division. To receive and file minutes from the Library Board from November 13th and December 18th, 2018. To approve a contract with various vendors for the purchase of supplies for the Water Maintenance Division. To accept the resignation of Roger Connor from the Park Board and to appoint Scott Trick to the Park Board.
Okay, do we have a motion for the approval of the issues and actions as listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to council comments this evening. Start with Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you, Your Honor. No comments tonight.
Okay, Mr. Bohannon.
No comment, sir.
All right, Ms. Vettori.
I was just wondering, I don't know how this works, but can we do a declaration for EcoFest, like declare it
We can do
EcoFest
a
Day?
proclamation and declare that day, and yes, it'll be eco-friendly for the day.
Sure, why not? Thank you.
So, anything else?
No, thank you.
All right. I'd like to express my appreciation for everyone coming down tonight. It was certainly good to hear from the judge as well as the chiefs. Certainly appreciate their input. As was indicated, this is a long-time study, and we look forward to continuing to work through this and analyze what's best for the city. So certainly appreciate everyone's input on that. Certainly got some good perspectives, and it's some important information for council to consider as we look at the future of the city and our direction and balance all the requests and all the challenges we have in front of us. So I certainly do appreciate that. With that, we can move to our legislation this evening. Ms. Fox.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Tonight there are 13 items of legislation, 2 of which are emergencies and therefore will require a vote to waive the charter provision requiring 2 separate readings. That would be in regards to ordinance number O-2019-09 and ordinance number O-2019-06.
I make a motion to waive the charter provisions requiring reading on 2 separate days and declaring the said mentioned ordinances and resolutions an emergency measure and read only, one time only.
Okay.
Second?
Okay. Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
First this evening is resolution number R 2019-01, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1318 to 1326 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading and is ready for action.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion or comments? We had Mr. Fisher here and the staff presentations previously. Okay, Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-02, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1364, 1366, and 1368 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, so we no other discussion or comments. Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-03, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1372, 1374, 1378, and 1380 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-04, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1389 and 1391 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-05, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 12 Clark Street in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Gank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-06, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1720 and 1722 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-07, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1500 First Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is the second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Resolution number R 2019-08, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Douglas Todd Fisher for redevelopment of 1316 First Avenue and 108, 112, and 114 Curtis Street in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. This is a second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
Second?
Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ordinance number O 2019-06, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing contracts for grounds maintenance for 2019 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, I know we had a presentation on this previously. Any questions or comments? Or Mr. Atkins, anything to add?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, anything from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ordinance number O 2019-07, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Motorola Solutions for the purchase of APX 6000 police radios. This is the second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we had a previous presentation on this and report. Any questions or comments from council? Mr. Atkins, anything to add? No changes?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Ordinance number O 2019-08, an ordinance amending section 618.17 in regards to the dangerous and vicious dogs and enacting section 618.25, hearings for dog designation of the Middletown Codified Ordinances. This is a first reading.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. The Ohio Revised Code was modified significantly back in 2012 in regards to dangerous dogs. The amendments before you will make our codified ordinances consistent with the Ohio Revised Code changes.
Okay, any questions from Mr. Atkins? All right, thank you.
Resolution number R 2019-09, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, Counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio, for the period ending December 31st, 2019. This is in regards to the police grant fund and is a first reading this evening.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. In 2018, the police received a $26,196 grant from the Ohio Attorney General's Office. They did not spend all of that in 2018. There was a balance of $74,8968 left of that grant, and they would like to appropriate that this year for training.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Mr. Atkins? All right. And the last item?
Ordinance number O 2019-09, an ordinance amending ordinance number O 2017-69, vacating a portion of Long Meadow Drive and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. About a year ago, council enacted ordinance number 2017-69, authorizing this vacation of Long Meadow Drive. As they went to file it in Warren County was not happy with the language that we had put in our ordinance. They have given us the language they would like to see, and this amends it so they can get the final recording done and get that completed.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Atkins? All right, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes our legislation for this evening. We do not have an executive session, so our next meeting will be in these chambers on March 5th, 2019. Thank you all, and a good evening.
Thank you.